right, welcome back to Survival Dispatch Insider. I'm Charley Hogwood with ReadyGoPrep.com, and today we're going to talk a little bit about strategic relocation, how to identify the perfect property for you and your family or your survival group. So you might say, well, I just want to go to the hills. And the problem that I find with a lot of people that say, I just want to go to the hills is, well, they don't know anybody in the hills. And well, I live in the hills and well, we don't want you there if you really don't belong. So how do you find a place to retreat to? Regardless of your situation, whether you live in an urban area or a rural area and you just want to get away to a new place, there are a couple of things that you need to think about. Now, if it's a permanent type of retreat or maybe a temporary retreat or vacation type of goal for you and your family, you've got to answer some questions first before you even set foot on this mission to move to the woods. So the first thing that you've got to do is you've got to start asking yourself your basic questions of, where do I want to go? So forget about all the books that you've read, forget about everything that you read about tax laws and gun laws and all these places to go and what's the best place for generic Joe. That's not you. You have specific needs that you have to adhere to make it successful go at this. So where is that going to be? Well, maybe I like to go somewhere based on the climate. I want to go to the mountains because I love the snow in the winter. No, I want to go to Arizona because I like the desert. No, maybe I want to go to the Middle Eastern states, mid-Atlantic area, and maybe I can feel like I got more of a growing season there. Well, no, maybe Central Florida because I got more of a year-round growing season there. I never freeze really, and so I've always got water around. So there's a lot of physical places that you can go, but where do you want to be? If you set a goal for where you desire to be, you'll find more of a motivation to start your search and go there. The second thing that you're really going to look at when it comes to relocation like that is, what about my family? A lot of times when I consult with families and survival groups and just individuals that are talking about their bug out location, they fail to take into account their family. Who else are you responsible for? That's the question that you need to ask yourself. You might want to go to get a cabin up in North Carolina, but what about the wife and kids? If you're going to move there permanently, are they going to be on board with this? Are they going to be happy to be further away from civilization than they are maybe now? Maybe it's going to take them longer to get to the doctor. The grocery store is not going to be as convenient to get to. They don't know anybody there. Medical care is not as great as it might be in a more advanced urban society. So those are some things you got to think about from their perspective. So before you even bring this up to them, I want you to start to do some personal exploration and say, okay, how do I think that they're going to act about this? How can I package this in a way that they'll say, that's not a bad idea. I am willing to listen to you, and keep going from that. So you talked about climate and family, and what about terrain? Do you want to live on the side of a mountain somewhere, or do you want to live on flat land? Do you want to live in a floodplain that's prone to flooding? Maybe you want to move to the bayous out in Louisiana. Is that really the best choice for you? Is that the best choice based on the disaster scenario that could happen in that area? So that's where we're really going to dig into a hazard analysis. We're going to understand, we're going to study everything in that area, and we're going to say, okay, is this area, is this region, does it fit on my short list of places to consider? And we'll dig into that in just a little bit. So let's look at where do I have to be? If I'm still employed and I have a daily job, if I move to this place, does my type of employment, does my job allow me to transfer there? Or can I find a new work in my chosen field of employment in that area? If the answer is no and you can't afford or you can't make any money living there, maybe that's not the place to go. Now that's not to say it's not permanently the place to go, but what it might mean is you might have to wait just a little bit until you can sock away enough resources to say, okay, now I'm ready to go and I have a little bit of a cushion to hold me over until I can get something happening. Or it might just be for retirement. Or you might even just say, hey, I'm going to get this and have it as a backup retreat. Then it won't matter as much as long as you can manage the resources to maintain and afford that and to keep it safe. So thinking about that, how about an unlivable situation? What would cause your property to be unlivable in this retreat location that you might be considering? Well, have you considered the neighbors in the area? If you're moving into an area that is maybe of lower economic status, where there's some crime that happens when you're not paying attention, that might not do so well if you start moving all of your great, outdoor gear, your survival supplies, maybe your food storage to this location, and you come back 6 months later and it's all gone and it's been broken into. It could be by bears, it could be by the neighbors. So you got to start thinking about, what is the security of this place? What's the visibility of this place? So that makes it a problem too. Is it accessible in all those times of year? Would it be unlivable if you got snowed in up there? These are things that you've got to start thinking about when it comes to that. What will happen if you cannot get ahead in this area? What happens if you get all moved up there and your employment doesn't work out? You have no way to keep this place going. You might lose that place. So we got to start really making sure that when we make this choice to move to that location, we've really considered all of our inside issues and our external pressures from our family. So what we want to do is we want to start making a checklist of things that we do want, the pros of moving to this location once we've narrowed it down, and the cons. So what would we not want in a location? So start thinking about to yourself, what is it you don't like about the area you're in now? Is that something that you're going to have to deal with when you get to the new area as well? If that's whatever it is, whether you well water or you're on the grid or off the grid, or you don't like maybe the tax laws or the gun laws or the distance to the resources, if those are cons to that location, mark those onto your pros and cons chart. Now, one way that you can really start to flesh this kind of thing out is to assign a point value to the pros and cons. So one being, okay, I don't like this a little bit, to 3 being, I don't like this a lot. And you can say, okay, well, I got 0, 0, 0, that means okay. I got +1, +1, +1, that says, okay, that's great. +3, that's amazing. Or I go negative side, -1, -2, -3, and I could say, okay, well, it snows all winter here. I can't get off the mountain, or I can't get on the mountain if I needed to. That might be a -3. And when you start adding all the pros and cons up, the numbers that you get to the bottom will say, okay, overall, this location ranks so where compared to the other 3 or 4 locations that I might have selected. So that's one way to kind of look at it and assign some points, and do it without the emotion. Once you start putting emotion into a real estate kind of situation, that becomes more of a problem. So take the emotion out, look at it as a business and survival decision, and you'll be much better off. Consider some tactical problems too. So if you're moving to this location because you feel that you would like a more safe retreat or a safer area, start considering those tactical situations like, is this location in between 2 other points that might lead to transient travel across my property? So if you moved somewhere and you've got 50 acres or 100 acres or 5 acres or even less, and you found that it happens to have a nature trail where people are constantly moving back and forth through there, that will present you a pretty significant tactical issue that you'll have to overcome. What is the crime in the area? What are the neighbors like? What are your defensive challenges? So what might be a defensive challenge in an area? Well, again, transient issues. That could be a roadway, a trailway, it could be a waterway, it could be a railroad coming through your area, it could be a high tension power line right away. Anything that would let people move back and forth through there can let them move freely and then drop into your property, pretty suddenly and unseen. So that could present some sort of a tactical challenge to you. So start thinking about that kind of thing. How about your proximity to community assets and liabilities? So you're going to say, well, what is a community asset and a community liability? Well, let me ask you, if you lived near a jail, would you consider that an asset or a liability to the community? Well, think about how a jail might operate. You might say, okay, well, there's more law enforcement in that area. But what happens when people get out of jail? Well, they go out to the street and they stand at that bus stop. And now you've got people that don't belong in that neighborhood kind of standing around so they can get out of there. And I've had friends that have had cars stolen that were jailers, stolen right out of the jail parking lot. So it's not necessarily going to be an asset to the community to be right near there. Liquor stores, gun stores, pawn shops, are those all assets or liabilities? Well, they have a tendency to draw people for vices and for things that they might not do so well with. So that might not necessarily be an asset. You don't have to have a gun store in your neighborhood to supply your collection and call that an asset. You can get those from somewhere else and still be just fine. Medical centers, dentist's office, veterinary centers, things like that. Those might be considered an asset because that'll give you a little bit more openness and access to first aid care, maybe pharmacies, maybe antibiotics or something like that that you might need. So that might be considered an asset. A highway off-ramp maybe is not a great asset to your neighborhood because you don't want everybody broken down on a highway walking down that ramp and ending up in your front yard and going through your grocery stores. So that could be a problem too. So you start to look at all of the different things in your area and say, okay, those are my assets and liabilities. So now start thinking about the hazard analysis of your area. So what's the hazard analysis mean? That means, okay, how prone am I to natural disasters? That might be earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, severe weather, mudslides, flash floods, anything that might cause you to have a natural disaster that might either trap you in or prevent you from getting away or getting to your retreat location. That could be a problem that you'll have to overcome. So we're going to dig into this a little bit later. I'm going to do an exercise called the hazard tree. And then we're really going to show you how to flesh out what those problems are. The other part of your hazard analysis will be the man-made issues. What kind of technological issues could then lead to a disaster in your location later? So if there was a lot of rain and you had a dam or a berm or a levee on a water retention or reservoir nearby, and that dam or levee would fail and flood your neighborhood out, perhaps like it did in Katrina in the 9th Ward, we would look at that as to be a hazard that we've got to try to figure out how to deal with. If you have a high risk for that, maybe that location is not the best place to be. So that's how we're going to start digging into our hazard analysis. There's going to be a little bit more on all this later on. So for now, we're going to drop this here and we'll pick it back up later on. But I'm Charlie with ReadyGoPrep.com and I'm speaking with Survival Dispatch today. Check out the website. The links will all be right here on the page and there'll be plenty more coming. Thanks again.